All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumper from msdynamicsworld.com. I hope everyone's doing well. Pleased to welcome you to this month's Portals community call. As always, being led by Microsoft MVP Nicholas Hayduke. Nick, great to have you back. And as we begin, just a couple notes from me. First of all, we do welcome your questions, so feel free to enter them at any time. Nick is always great about keeping an eye on that, and I certainly will too. We are also recording today's event, so if you miss any part of it or want to come back to it, you'll be able to check that out either on our site or through Nick through Engineer Code's YouTube page. So without any further delay, I think we are ready to begin. Nick, I'm going to hand things off to you.
Sounds good. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, and I even got the date right, unlike last month. All right, well, thanks everyone. Yeah, today we've got some, we're going to talk about some Liquid and some JavaScript stuff, but yeah, let's get into it here. All right, quick intro if this is your first time joining us. My name is Nicholas Hayduke. That's a picture of me from 10 years ago. Basically when I first started getting my experience with Power Apps Portals. So I'm the president and software engineer with Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. MVP and someone who's been working with the Portals product for a long time, based on having started my career with ADX Studio, the folks who built the product. So please feel free to join or connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter. I've got the active YouTube channel as well as the podcast. So lots of different ways to get in touch with me. So please do that if you wish to do so. As always, want to express my unending gratitude to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for working with us on these community calls. We received lots of good feedback. People seem to like what we're doing here, so in no small part to Jason, and he's worked with me since the beginning to help me get these organized. So kudos to him and thanks as always. All right, agenda. So unlike last month, I was able to scrounge up a little bit of news to go over. Then we'll get into today's topic, which is fun with Liquid and JavaScript. Now, I do have one kind of situation I'm going to go through with Liquid and JavaScript, but there's probably going to be time for, like, if people have any particular questions about Liquid or JavaScript. We can probably kind of go off the cuff a little bit and see if I can answer any additional questions. So if you do have any specific situation or questions about Liquid that you'd like answered, please do post those in the questions, and we'll hopefully have a chance to get through that. And then we'll of course talk about the next community call. This is it's a little bit of a different one next month, so stay tuned for that. And then again, Q&A on any topic, anything that you anything Portals related that you have questions about, please feel free to ask. All right, Portal news. So Build, Microsoft Build, their big conference is next week. And I mean, Portals is part of that. The Power Platform is part of that. So if you haven't registered already, you can certainly do that. So I know back in the day you'd think Build was all about the hardcore programming stuff, but Power Platform's a big piece of the whole kind of Microsoft ecosystem now. So yeah, I know that there's lots of kind of Power Platform content that's going to be available at Build. So something worth checking out if you haven't already. And then another kind of conference news, I know that I think it's actually going on right now. The folks at the Power community, including our Pitt, who's an MVP who does a lot of Portals work, they're running one of their boot camps, which is the Power Apps Developer Boot Camp. And I know that there's at least a couple of Portals specific sessions that are going to be running on, I think on the 21st, which would be Saturday. But yeah, so definitely worth checking out. Those Power community events are great. They're free for everyone, so go and check that out if you're looking for some more Portals content. Okay, and then the last one here, and this is a feature that's been there for a little bit longer. I think it's kind of flown under the radar, and another MVP, Oliver Rodriguez, who I've worked with. Him and I have known each other for a few years now. Does a lot of Portal stuff. Is the king of the Portal forums, so I think he's been a guest presenter on this community call before. He posted about the ability to get portal information in the context of a plugin. So if you're writing a plugin for Dataverse, the plugin context that they pass into the constructor or the execute event or whatever it is, the context that they pass in, actually Microsoft has updated. So now includes, you can get information about the contact record. So in the olden days, you could get the user who was running it, but that was always the user within Dynamics or Dataverse, and it was always a system user. But as we know on the portal, the user is not a user, it's a contact. So Microsoft has essentially extended the context, the execution context that you get, and you can check to see if it is a portal request, so if it was a request that came from a portal, and if so, you can get the ID of the contact that execute that request. So that can be super useful to do. So yeah, if you're writing plugins and they're related to portal data, and somehow it's helpful to know which contact it was that was on the portal that did it, that is possible with the new context that Microsoft is passing into the plugin framework. So just wanted to highlight that because I know that it kind of wasn't on my radar when it first came out as well. So want to make sure everyone was aware of that kind of cool feature. That's one of those ones where I never even kind of thought about it until I heard about it. I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But it wasn't something that I know I'd heard anyone ask for, but they kind of delivered. And it was like, yeah, that could be super useful. So that is it there. And so Oliver's got a nice blog post kind of explaining what that is. Okay. On to the next slide, which is today's topic. So we've covered Liquid before. We've talked about JavaScript before. But I mean, you can probably never talk too much about Liquid. I would say that that's probably the #1 commonly requested topic. So when people kind of sign up for these things, they often will say, oh, can you cover this topic? Can you cover that topic? It seems like half the time people are saying, hey, just like more Liquid stuff. I want advanced Liquid. So I just figured that this month we could just kind of do another example of Liquid. There's really kind of two things that I think about when I think about Liquid. It's actually a very simple, it's a pretty simple language. There's not a whole bunch of different keywords, and in terms of a programming language, it's a pretty small programming language. So that makes me kind of feel like when people are asking oh, can you give me kind of more examples of what you can do with Liquid? It's more about, or are you aware of kind of the special tags? And again, when it comes to the tags and the functions that are available in Liquid, I mean, you just can't compare it to what you get in something like .NET, I don't know, 100, 1,000 times more in .NET. So Microsoft's page, basically their documentation covers all of, or maybe not all, but I would say the large majority of the functions that are available in Liquid. So it's really not that complex. You've got the ability to kind of do if conditions and for loops and that sort of thing, but really it comes down to just learning what the additional tags are that are specific to portals, whether it's the Power BI or whether it's the fetch XML or whether it's the entity form or web form. So there are a few kind of special things that are related to portal. Yeah, I think sometimes when someone's first starting, they might kind of get afraid of oh, it's a brand new programming language. Well, it's well, it's not really that big of a programming language. It's really kind of meant there to do if conditions and that sort of thing. And again, there are a few a handful of things that are kind of specific about portals, but nothing to be afraid of. So, but the other thing that I kind of find is that people struggle sometimes with mixing JavaScript and Liquid. And to me, That is the like that's really the where you can do cool stuff. I don't often, I mean, we do, but most of the time when I'm writing Liquid, it's actually to supplement my JavaScript code, or it's to actually use Liquid to generate the JavaScript code. So yeah, I really think that if you start mixing Liquid and JavaScript, there's a lot of cool things you can do. But you have to kind of keep in your mind that Liquid code is server-side code. So the Liquid code all runs first, and if you use your Liquid code to generate JavaScript, it can get a bit confusing. You can look at something and you write a loop and it produces 1,000 lines of JavaScript. I mean, that's what happens, right? So it's about looking at the source of your page and understanding that, okay, all the Liquid runs first, it generates the JavaScript, and then the browser interprets the output of that. So, and we'll look at the example here that I've got coming up here. But I really, the really kind of cool things that I see people doing on portals, often it's using Liquid to essentially create kind of dynamic JavaScript that changes based on what the user is doing. So that's what you'll see in the example that we have here. And Jim, I do see your question. I was surprised it even took that many minutes for someone to ask me that question, and I will we'll chat about that at the end here. And that is about the rumor of the changing of the name of Power Apps portals to Power Pages. So we'll chat about that at the end here. Okay, so what I want to do is just essentially walk through a scenario, and this is a real world thing. We did this for a client over the last couple of months. We kind of built out this functionality for them where we were using Liquid and we were using JavaScript to implement something that's not possible out of the box with portals. But in the end, it's not that many lines of JavaScript. It's not that many lines of Liquid, but kind of combining the two, you can achieve some things that you can't do with one or the other. Now, in some of those cases, now you could maybe do a lot of it in JavaScript because we've got the web API. So you could maybe query that data. But I think in a lot of cases, Liquid is still the way to go. So even though you can query data with the web API, so you can query data in JavaScript, that does not replace the need for, say, the fetch XML query in Liquid. There's a lot of reasons why server side makes sense in situations, when it has to do with security, that sort of thing. Like with you can't do server or client side security trimming. If you do, that's just security by obscurity. So with Liquid, if you're kind of restricting, if you put an if condition around some results and it hides them, the user's never seen that, so they wouldn't know that record exists. So there's definitely lots of reasons why Liquid is still very, very useful. So in this situation, I'm going to go back to my standard scenario of, like, I'm a big golfer. Here in Canada, our golf course has just opened. We kind of had a crappy spring, so we're just kind of getting into the full swing of things here, pun intended. So I'm going to kind of show the situation of a portal that let's say I developed for a member of a network of golf courses. So someone may sign up and say, hey, I can play at these five different golf courses. And so what the person can do is they can view the various golf courses, and they can view the various holes that each of the golf courses has. And what that member can do is they can submit a maintenance request. So let's say there was a broken ball washer or something. They could go in there and say, hey, I want to submit the broken ball washer. Please go ahead and fix that. And they can do that either at the golf hole level. So they can say, hey, on hole number 3, there was a broken ball washer, or they can just say, just in general, there was something wrong with the course. So they can create this maintenance request, and it can be related to either the hole or to the golf course in general. And so to accomplish this, what we have is we have a lookup on the maintenance request that you can either set it to. We have one lookup that's a golf course, and we've got another one that's the hole. And what we want to build is it so when you click the button to say create a new maintenance request, and we're going to put that just in the header of our portal, when we click that button, if we were on a golf course, we want it to just pre-fill that. I shouldn't have to select the record I was just on, and same with the golf hole. So if you're on a hole and you say, hey, I want to submit a service request, it should know where you were and just pre-fill that lookup. Why should I have to select that again? So So it's kind of like the relationship mapping that you'd get in a model-driven app. And to be clear, you could maybe use like the create related record options that exist on basic forms. I'm not saying that there are other ways of solving it, but in the particular situation that we had, this was the best way to accomplish it. So I kind of wanted to go through that today. So let me just kind of bring up my portal here. So I've got my portal. This is just kind of a basic Power Apps portal. Doesn't use any of the Dynamics templates. So I've got my golf courses. The one golf course where I'm a member, it's called Augusta National. I wish, but that's what I'm using here. If anyone has any friends, like my bucket list is to play Augusta National. So if anyone has any friends that are members there, please let me know. And I can beg and plead them to get me on there. But that's the course that we're going to use here in our sample. So you can see here, I've opened up this. This is just a basic form that has a subgrid of the holes. And you can see here, I've got all the different holes that exist on the course. And I can open up, say, hole number 1, and I can go to this particular page, which is, again, this is just a regular basic form that's displaying the details of this. And so what we want to do is add a button where I can say, hey, I want to create a maintenance request. And when I go to create that maintenance request, I want to see that that this particular hole, or in the case of Beyond the Course, that the course that lookup is existing. So I've already got the create maintenance request page created here. And so you'll see when I go there, I've got a couple lookups to the course and to the hole. But you can see here, I haven't set it up yet so that those get pre-filled when I do that. So now, so what I'm going to do, just 1 second here. Okay. I'm assuming you can still see my screen there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a button. We're just going to put a button right in the header that says create maintenance request. So I'm still a little bit old school. So some of you may be using VS Code and the Pack CLI tool. My go-to is still just go back to XRM Toolbox and do some of that work just in the portal code editor. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into my web template. I'm going to go into my header web template, and I'm going to add that button. No promises that's going to look pretty, but it should work. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right here, and I'm just going to create a link here. And so let me just grab the URL of this thing. And back to here. So do that. Create maintenance request. And then I'm going to say, just to make it all bootstrappy, let's just make this a button. And it's important, so let's make it a button primary. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, I need to reload here. So let me just copy this. That's what happens when you open it latest, or you open it earlier in the morning. All right, let's see if the cache invalidation gods are in my favor. Oh yeah, there we go. So there's an ugly button. I mean, maybe not the nicest place to put it, but there it is. So when I click this, again, if I go back here, the idea is if I click this, we want it to pre-fill which course I was on. Now, of course, I haven't done anything. That's just a regular anchor tag with a link, so it still doesn't do that. But before we get into fixing that problem, I just wanted to mention about the use of site markers. So what I did here was I just created a link with this particular URL. Now, this code will break if the people who manage the portal change the partial URL of either this page or this page, or if they were to reparent that page. If they say, do you know what, I want that to be right child of the home page. If they do that, that page or that link will break. So I always prefer to use site markers for these types of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to go into my model, not there. I'm into my model-driven app. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a site marker. Now, if you're not familiar with site markers, the purpose of a site marker is basically a way of essentially like tagging a page or marking a page as, hey, it does this particular function. And so that way you can get it without having to know what its URL is. So for example, like the profile page, sometimes we just want to redirect to the profile page. We don't care what the URL is, but it's a way of saying, here's a name for something that regular content authors they're not going to change the site marker. They may change the name of the page, they may change the URL of the page, but they shouldn't be touching the site marker. So it's kind of a developer thing where we can create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one called create maintenance request. I've got one website here, and then this one, you basically pick the page. So there's my page. So now that I've created this site marker, I can go back to my code, and rather than hard coding this, I can use a liquid tag. So remember what I was saying before, it's like you just gotta, there's some liquid tags that you just kind of learn, and again, Microsoft has the documentation on pretty much all of these, but there is a liquid tag called site markers. It's the index, it's basically a dictionary of all the site markers, so that would be create, create maintenance request. So this is using the name of the site marker, and then from that site marker object, I can go .url. So I'm going to update that. Now, if I return to here, I was just going to look at when we look at the tags that are available. This is, again, this is the Microsoft documentation, understanding all the different tags. And again, Microsoft's got a pretty extensive list of them. Somewhere in here, we should be able to find site markers. Is it variable tags? Nope. Iteration tags? Nope. Control, no, it wouldn't be in there. Liquid tags overview. They keep moving these. Somewhere in here should be site markers. Code component, no. Of course, now I cannot find it, but, oh, sorry, there we go. Liquid objects. I was just in the, yeah. There we go, site markers. So you can see that the site marker object returns you the URL attribute, and you can access other attributes of the site marker table as well. So the row that you have, you can access its name if you want to, but primarily you're looking for the URL. So if you kind of want to learn about Liquid, I mean, going through this section, the work with Liquid templates, this section, I mean, understanding what all these different options are, I mean, that's really the key to it. You can get site settings, you can get the request to object, and some of those we'll touch on today. But that's really, you know, if you want to learn about that, it's about going through these different objects and understanding what those are able to do. So let me just see if, now that I've got this, let's see what the URL of this thing is. So it does give me that. Now, that doesn't really prove anything because it was that anyways. So I'm going to go back into my portal. That one, where are we here? Yeah, this one right here. So I'm going to go to my create maintenance request page, and I'm going to change this to create maintenance request now because I think it's super important. That's going to get saved, and I'm going to browse the website. And now we should hopefully, if I did everything properly, we should see that create maintenance request link updated. And of course we didn't because I probably didn't save it. So we've got this here, site markers, URL, update that. And then go back here, and I'm just going to browse website again here. So you can see now the URL is create maintenance request now. So they can change the title of that page all they want. They can change the URL of that page. They could move the URL, move that into a completely different place on the site. But we've now got that link to that page through that site marker. So that's why on a portal, you should never be hard coding any particular URL. Instead, you should be using site markers. Okay, so next thing we want to work on is we want to make it so that when I'm on this particular page, let's include in the URL that we write here, instead of just being go to the maintenance request now, what we're going to do is we're going to pass a query string parameter over to that page saying, hey, here's the actual ID of where you're coming from. So we're passing over to that context. This is where we can use the liquid. So in here, so we've got the URL, and what we want to do is add additional query string parameters. So let's just do something like this. So question mark related ID equals. And so within Liquid, we've got two different syntaxes. We got the two curly braces or the curly brace with the %. So the two curly braces, the purpose of those is that it actually outputs something to the page, whereas these ones are just for control. So you'll see that this thing actually doesn't output anything. What's in it may output as something, but this is just for control, and this is for actually outputting to the page. So in this case, what we want to do is we're going to use the request object. So if I flip back to my documentation here, if I look at the request object, we can use the request to get params. So that's the query string parameters, and we can use it to get the path. We can use it to get the path and query, the URL, and the query string parameters. So in Liquid, we can use the request object to get the query string parameters. And if we look at this page, we know that the ID of the golf course that we're on is the ID query string parameter. So what I'm going to do is go back to here, and I'm going to just want to output related be request.params.id, because ID is the name of the query string parameter that I want to include. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to my portal, and we'll see if I need to clear the cache to, yeah. So let's browse website here. Let me just open up another tab so that I don't have to do that every time. All right, so I'm going to go back to golf courses. I'm going to go to Augusta National. And now if we hover over this, you can see that we've got question related ID equals nothing. So did I type something wrong here? Request. Let's just see here. Output request.params.id. Interesting. Oh, okay. I know why this isn't working. I'm just going to do this. I'll explain what this is in just a second. Okay, and let's just clear the cache on that, and we'll see if we can get the URL. All right, so now, so the ID is 676F. If I click on this, you can see I got related ID is 676F. So that's the same ID. So now we're on this page, and we've got the ID of the record that we came from. So what we want to do is, so we kind of use liquid to get at that. Now what we want to do is we want to use liquid in JavaScript to grab that ID from the query string and actually pre-fill the details of, pre-fill the lookup with those details. So to do that, this is the create maintenance request. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go into the entity forms. Sorry, I just need to reload this. Entity forms, and we've got our maintenance request create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if request.params my memory's terrible. What did I call it? Related ID. Related ID. And so liquid does, you don't have to say equals null or doesn't equal null or anything like that. Like you can do this, and if there's no related ID param, it will fail that condition. And I'll just do an end if. So if there is a related ID query string parameter, what we're going to want to do is 3 lines of code. So, and the 3 lines of code are only necessary because it's a lookup. When we set a lookup, we actually have to set 3 things. We have to set the ID of the record, we have to set the type of the record, and we have to set the name of the record. So let's just start off with the name of the record. So what I'm going to go to is I'm going to go back to my form here, and we're dealing with golf course right now. So let's just look at what this markup looks like, and you'll see why we have to set 3 things. We actually have 3 different inputs. We've got the entity name, we've got the ID itself, and we've got the where is it here? The golf course name. So all of these use a standard notation of the name of the lookup attribute, and then underscore name, just the name of the attribute for the ID, and then the entity name. So those are the 3 fields that we need to update. So for now, I'm just going to go back over here. I'm going to put that in there. So I'm targeting that. And then, so we've got that name, and then I'm going to say .val is something. We'll just deal with that in a second. Let's do kind of the easy one first, which is just the ID. And then this one is entity name. So those are the 3 fields you have to set for a lookup to work properly. So just kind of using some standard jQuery here. So in terms of the golf course field, the one without the name or the entity name should just be the ID of the record. So we know that that comes in on that query string parameter. And so this is where, again, you have to keep in mind that the JavaScript and the liquid are kind of running at different times. So you have to keep in mind that this bit of liquid code is going to run and produce the JavaScript. So that's why you need the quotes here, because this thing is going to give us a GUID, and that just needs to be a string. So we need to wrap it in there. Otherwise, if I didn't have the quotes in there, you're going to end up with invalid JavaScript. So you kind of have to, in your mind, process all the liquid, think about what kind of JavaScript that's going to generate, and then make sure you have syntactically valid JavaScript. So the entity name in this case is just nh_golf course, and the name is, well, it's the name of the golf course. Now, in theory, we could probably pass that in the query string, but there's a way in Liquid we can just get that so that we don't have to pass an additional query string parameter. So that is another one of the more useful objects in Liquid, which is the entities object. So the entity object, you can then put in the name of the field here. So nh_golf course, sorry, the name of the table. And then in here, you can put in the ID of the record. So again, we can get that from the request.params.relatedID. And so this syntax here, I'll kind of move it out because we're nesting into a few different places now. So just to make it clear, so we're doing entities, and then we have to say the entities. The other syntax we can use here that might make it a little more clear is we can do something like that. So we're accessing the golf course table, and we're accessing it by the key of its ID. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to put that in here. And then once we have the record, what we want is the name. So that's just an object that is the record from Dataverse, and we're just grabbing its name. And so these would always be the logical names that come from Dynamics, or sorry, from Dataverse. So we've grabbed the name based on the ID, we've set the value of the ID based on the ID, and we've hard-coded the name of the table. Those are the three values that we need to set a lookup property. If you're using something like this to set like just an option set or some other kind of more simple field like a text field, you'd only have one line. You can just set the value of those fields. But an option set is just a little bit trickier because there's those three fields that you have to set. So let's see if this will work the first time. It almost never does, but let's see. So I'm going to refresh this and see if we get the, nope, okay. Now, one other theory before I claim it didn't work is just make sure I'm clearing the cache here. Okay, let's check our developer tools. Did I have a syntax error? Yeah. Nope. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so it didn't work as I expect. So what do we do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the source code on the page, because I'd like to see what my JavaScript looks like. So you can see that they put my JavaScript in here. So you can see, so I got NH course name, Val Augusta Natural. Okay, that worked great. NH golf course, Val. Okay, so it actually outputted the JavaScript that I was expecting. It's put it in, I've got the ID, it's got the name. So why wouldn't this work? Did I mess up the name here or something? We've got NH underscore golf course name, NH underscore golf course, NH underscore golf course underscore entity name. NH underscore, I didn't spell anything incorrectly. Oh, I know what's going on here. So this script shows up at the top of the page, which means it ran before that element even existed. So I need to wrap this. This is just more of a jQuery thing. I need to wrap this in a document ready so that it runs after the form has loaded. So let me just do that. Do that. All right, so that should basically delay the running of this code until, let's just reload this, see if we get that change. Yep, so there we go, until the form is loaded, because essentially it's running the code and those elements didn't exist yet. There we go. So now if I were to submit this thing, we've got Augusta National already selected as our golf course. So let's quickly do the golf hole as well. Now, there's a couple things in our actual implementation that we did for our client. I think there was 4 or 5 different record types that it could pre-fill. So rather than hard coding golf course every place, what we actually did, and it wasn't a golf course, but in their situation, what we did is we replaced this with another query string parameter. So let me just kind of show you how that might look. So everywhere we see golf course, I did this and we said related, let's do related table. So that we can replace that, and that. So now, and of course, this happens to work because our lookup field was also named the same thing as our table. If you had a different name for your lookup column, then you would need a third thing. But in this case, just for convenience, we've got just a single one that we needed. So we've got this. So I'm going to update that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my header, and that's just something else that I have to pass in the query string parameter. So that's in my web templates, and go up to my header here. And so here, in addition to passing the related ID, I'm going to go n related entity equals, and so this is where it can get a bit tricky. So there's really no way when I'm on a page, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. I don't know how, if there's a on the page, if there's a form on the page to get the form that's configured for that page. Now, I suppose I probably could go within the page object. I don't know. I've never done this before. Let me try here. You've got the page object. So let me just bring up the documentation. Go back up here. So we've got the page object. So the page object is the web page that's currently showing on the page. So you can see we can get at all of its attributes. In theory, I could maybe look at the web or the basic form that's on the page. But the thing that you have to remember about Liquid is that when you're using Liquid, it enforces the table permissions. And so I'm not going to have access to the basic form table, which might tell me which table it's pointing at. So I don't think that that's going to work unless I set up some entity or some table permissions that I don't really want to set up. So what we did in practice was we used site markers again. So what we did was we checked to see if this was a particular site marker. So we did something that looks like percent that. So if site markers, and let's just call this golf course details. So if the site marker.url is equal to the request.path, then we know that we are on the golf course page. So then this query string parameter can be nh_golf course. Then what we can do is we can do else if. Make sure. Yeah, else if. So in Liquid, else if you don't put the E, it's one of those languages. Else if the site marker, do this. Else if the site marker golf, I'm going to say golf hole details equals that, then we are going to put nh_golf hole. And then I'm going to do my end if right here. So if the page we're on is the site marker for the golf course details, then we're going to use the nh golf course thing. And if it's the golf hole, then we're going to do that. I just need to double check here whether my golf course hole, can't remember if my golf course hole, if I call it golf course hole or just golf hole. Tables, golf course hole. Okay, let me just put that in here, golf course hole. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to update it. I'm going to go back to my here. I'm just going to look at my source because it's a little easier to see in here. We're going to refresh the page, and this is my page right here. Oh, not that one. So I'm going to go back to my golf course because I want to look at it through this. I'm going to view source on this. And here's my link. So you can see I got my related ID, but I still don't have that related entity because I haven't created my site marker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new site marker. I'm going to call it golf course details, which was the name that we used right here, golf course details. And I'm going to say it's my website. And the page is golf course, which is this one right here. So now that I've got that site marker up, I should be able to refresh this. And now it's putting it in there because my liquid condition has now matched. So again, we've got the site marker's URL is matching the request path. So basically the URL I'm on matches the URL of the site marker that I'm interested in. So, and if so, then it's going to output golf course. So what that means is I can go here. I can click maintenance request for Augusta National and related ID and related entity is that. So let me look at the source code here. I must have broken something in the nh_golf course. Interesting. Where did my JavaScript go? Got that thing there. Oh, there we go. Oh, so I must have, my syntax must have been wrong in my thing. Let's bring that up. Oh, related table. I probably called it related entity. Let me fix that. There we go. Yep. Okay. Now, just clear some cache here and we'll give that one another try. All right, so now we can say create maintenance request, and now we're filling that in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go to a hole. I'm going to click create maintenance request. And the only reason that this isn't going to work is because I still haven't set that site marker. So if we go into here and I create my one new site marker, just to avoid golf hole details, I'll probably just call it golf course hole details for consistency. Copy that, set up the site marker, grab that, golf course hole, save this, over here, clear my cache. And I'm going to try and create a maintenance request. And of course, that doesn't work. Let's see why this doesn't work this time. Okay, so I didn't do that. Oh, do you want my related? It didn't work on my related table thing was blank. Okay, let's take a quick peek as to why that might be. So golf course hole. Let's take a quick peek there. So yeah, the related table is blank. So golf course hole details. And so if I go back to here, golf course hole details, else if golf course hole, related table, golf course hole, else if, else if site markers, golf course hole details, seems like that should work. I know we're kind of reaching the end here, so getting this last one to work may not be the most important thing here, but let's just give it one more try. Oh yeah, there it goes. Must have just been a caching thing. So now we've got our related table golf course hole. And let me just inspect this one. Golf course hole entity name. So now if I view source on this one, document. So now we've got golf course hole name, ID. So this is being set the golf course hole name. So all that we're missing here is, I wonder if I change the default property on this. Oh, right. And that's why before I had that as the index, because this also needs to be like that, because I had that one thing hard coded there. Okay, and browse website. So you can see it was filled in because we've got the X button. We just hadn't set the name. So there we go. So now we've got this thing filled in based on the parameters that we passed in from the other side. So we've looked at using liquid, mixing it with JavaScript. So we've got some liquid that produces some JavaScript based on the query string parameters. I mean, and so this is an example of like, yes, in JavaScript, could you grab query string parameters? Yes, it's a bit of a, you got to write a function that's kind of ugly. So why not use liquid to just make that job a lot easier? So we looked at how you can access the request object. The request.param gives you the query string parameters. You can get the current page. And you can use the else if here to create your related tables. We've talked about the site markers, which you can use to avoid hard coding of URLs and basically use it to identify which page you're on. So you can use that for the path as well. So we've done that. The last thing I want to talk to you about here, because I know there's some questions, is just this substitution tag. The reason I needed that was because of the header and footer output caching. So this header is basically the first time you visit the page, it will cache that, which is a different cache than the regular portal cache. And so this substitution tag makes it so that it reevaluates this particular part of the page every single time you visit it, which is important since this ID and this related table kind of changes for every different page. So I basically wanted to not have the output caching here. And so when we looked at it last time, I loaded it first on a page that didn't have an ID on it. So then when I visited other pages, even though those pages did have an ID, this whole template had already been cached, so it didn't evaluate any of that code. So that's what the purpose of that substitution tag is. Okay, so Mike, I see your question there. Hopefully that answered your question about that. I do have some portals tips on that from I think a few weeks ago about what the substitution tag is. But again, it's about getting rid of that, cache. So yeah, Jim says he normally clears the cache using the underscore services / about page. Yeah, no problem with doing that. I've gotten out of that habit just a little bit because in order to do that, you have to be logged in as an admin user. And so when we're developing, the admin user adds all those extra tags and like it gives you the edit bar and you get the edit things showing up everywhere. So sometimes it's nice to see the portal as someone who's not an administrator or as an anonymous user. So by using the Portal Studio, you don't have to be like it's using your credentials that's logged into the Maker Studio versus having to be logged into the portal. But no, I still use the underscore services / about page all the time. It's just I've kind of got more into the habit of using the Portal Studio just because it doesn't require me to be logged into the portal. So Jim asked, should we use a site marker to point to the root URL of our CDN when we keep all of our images, downloaded videos and whatnot, or can they only point to page URL with port? Yes, so the site markers can only point at web pages within the portal. So it's really only appropriate for that. If you wanted to have a URL for, say, the root URL for your CDN, then I would use the site settings table. Create yourself a site setting, and then you can use the settings object. So rather than site markers, you just replace it with settings, and that will do the same thing. You can do that, but it's just you're obviously not going to get the URL for that. It's just going to be the setting will be that actual URL. So hopefully, Jim, that answers your question there. Last question here. So Jim, have you heard the news that Microsoft may be changing the name of Power Apps portals to Power Pages? So yes, I have heard that news. I've seen the same like the same news reports that you all have seen. I mean, I can't, like, I'm not Microsoft. I can't confirm or deny that. So all I would say is this: like, it's an interesting idea. And if it is true, what would excite me about that is that, I mean, to me, the implication is that it's no longer part of apps. It's part of, like, it's part of the Power Platform. That would be my guess, right? So if you're removing apps, you're kind of bringing it up a level, similar to how a few weeks or a few years ago, it was like the Dynamics 365 portals, and then it became Power Apps portals. And so it became one of the three types of Power Apps. So if Microsoft is thinking about doing Power Pages and they're removing apps, I can only hope that that means it's becoming even more important. So, so I have heard those rumors. I don't, to be honest, I don't know. Like, I can't remember what the rumor said. Like when the talk is that they're going to be doing it. Those parts I don't know. But I have heard those rumors. So I'm as interested as any of you guys to find out if Microsoft is indeed going to announce something like that. But if that were to happen, to me, it seems like it might be a good thing. So we'll see. Yeah, it means that the product is getting some attention, and way better than the attention that it got last fall with the quote-unquote security breach, which we talked about, which really wasn't a security breach. But yeah, usually, I don't know. Usually in this space, if you're renaming something, it's not because it's not working. It's usually for you know, they're going to continue to invest. So yeah. Got a question. Could something like this be used to display different forms on a single page? Absolutely. Yep. We do that quite often too, where you can use Liquid and use the entity form Liquid tag, and you can use that to say if we've done it before where you want a read-only version. And in fact, we're working on a project right now. You want a read-only version in some cases, and you want an editable version in another case. So you can say if this attribute equals read-only, then do that, like show it, and whatever conditions you want to dream up in Liquid, then you can output an editable version of a basic form, and you can do it on a not editable version, a read-only version. So you could absolutely use something like this to have different forms on a single page. Still only one form, but you can use it to have different forms for sure. All right. We're at time here. I guess just last bit here before everyone takes off. Our next call is going to be a little bit of a different day and time. We're scheduling it for June 13th, which is a Monday. We're doing it at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, but we will have some special guests with us. We'll talk more about the special guests here shortly, but I'll be sending out an email, and I know Jason will be publicizing as well. But we have some very special guests. We're very excited about June 13th and what we'll be able to you know, what our guests will be able to share with you. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, keep an eye out for what June 13th will be. Again, it's a little bit of a different date and time to accommodate some different schedules, but I think that's going to be a call that everyone's going to want to pay attention to. Jason, we're at time here, so anything else to add?
No, I agree. Well worth showing up next month. I'm really looking forward to it too. And yeah, please do look out. You'll see that in some follow-up emails and on our sites, as Nick said. No, I don't think I have anything else though, Nick. Thanks for taking the time to walk us through all that. I'm also looking forward to some of the news out of Build. And yeah, I think with that, and thanks to everyone for their questions.
All right, thanks everyone. See you next month.
With that, we will end the session. Have a good day, everyone.